everybody. Welcome to the Truth Will Set You Free show. This show is brought to you by TLBTV and the Liberty Beacon Project. I'm your host, Linda Diane Wattley, and I'm smiling today, a little excited, but more thankful, more appreciative to have this person today. Alan S. Charles. I am so thankful for what he had to give us. And one of the main things I'm thankful about is he's going to be able to help children. That is so important to me. And the thing that I love about him is he's actually given his life to make a difference in this world. He's an amazing businessman. He has been a professional baseball player. He calls his harness race driver, professional. He is an amazing speaker. I don't know why he's not a minister, but I'm not going to mess with that. But what he has to give do have anointing on it. That's why I say that, because he has also become an author. I read his book. He's going to have to tell me about his title, Walking Out the Other Side. I read the first 25 pages and I was like, it can't be any more. It just can't be any more. And he was just getting started. And the way he wrote this story, I wish any person who is suffering, not just with drugs, because he is a survivor of drug addiction. But that's not the only thing he's a survivor of. He is a survivor of his childhood. I take foundations very seriously, and the foundation that this man, Alan Charles, had to endure is sad. But yet, he had something that the world couldn't take. He had something that he knew he had, but he didn't know what it was. Because he didn't acknowledge spirituality then. He just knew it was something powerful in him. And he went on, he lived that life. He walked that life of suffering and pain and alienation. Basically, he never really cried out being a victim. I don't even know if he even realized he was a victim, but he was a victim. But he's a victor today, and he has shared his story. And the things that he has to share with us, what he learned from his journey, is very important. And I'm telling anybody who knows anybody who questioned their self-esteem or their self-value, not just self-esteem, just your value as a human being, they really should read his book. Even if you've never done drugs or alcohol or anything, you just want to be at a better place. Walking Out the Other Side is an excellent book to share with people that you care about. Okay, Alan, how are you?
Hi, Linda. I am sitting here taken back with all of those wonderful things you said about me. I can't thank you enough. I don't know if my head's big enough to get through the screen here so we continue the interview, but thank you so much. Those were wonderful things.
You know, we have to go back to when you was a child, because that's when everything began. I am curious, what would you describe the relationship you had with your father?
You know, there were only a handful of things that I remember. My father was on the road quite a bit. He was gone 3 to 3.5 weeks out of a month, where he would travel in upstate New York, and he had a company that he was selling steel. So he would have to go to all his customers. And the things that I remember was that the main thing was he would come home for 2 or 3 days, and he would just be home. He wouldn't go anywhere or do anything, and he would be with us. And I was pretty well assimilated into having friends and going out and playing with all the kids in the neighborhood. And my brother, who was 2 years younger than me, really didn't have that relationship. I was good in sports, he wasn't so good. I was good in school, he wasn't so good. So he would kind of hang out, and when my father came home, he would stay by my father's side for those 2 or 3 days. I would kiss my father hello. I would talk a couple of minutes and then boom, right out the door to go play wiffle ball or kickball or football, whatever the ball game of the month was. So my relationship with him it wasn't a deep relationship because he always traveled and he was on the road. So my memory happens to be pretty phenomenal. So I can remember when I think about things, I can think of certain situations and I can almost go back into the time. I remember my father taking me over his lap once and he gave me that saying, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you. And I remember I was 4 years old. I think I yelled at him and he boom, a couple of times on the tush. And so I remember that like it was yesterday. And I was 4. So I recently turned 58. That was 54 years ago. And I remember it like it was yesterday. So to answer your question, I have these fleeting moments and instances that I remember with my father up until when he passed when I was 9 years old.
Well, tell me this, how do you think he saw you?
Well, one of the things that I didn't write about in the book, and it kind of hit me later on, is my father, when he would go travel, and I guess this was foreshadowing for my story, as he would leave the apartment to go back out on the road, he would always tell me, you're the man of the house. You take care of things when I left. And I guess when he passed, I really took that to heart and, kind of took over everything.
So did you know he loved you?
Yeah, I believed he loved me. But what I later found out is he had so many problems and things that he was dealing with and financial hardship and different things that I shared about in the book of he had a whole nother family that he didn't get to see his kids again. And he was going through a lot. So I'm sure he loved me. I know he definitely loved me. But it was kind of out of sight, out of mind. And, when he died at 9 years old, my whole world turned around at that point.
Okay, then for about 2 years, it was just you, your mom, and your dad.
My brother.
For 2 years, you was 2 years older than him, right?
Oh, yeah. So for the first 2 years.
For a while there was just you, your mom, and your dad.
Correct.
And then his name was what, Neil?
Neil, yes.
Neil came along. Tell us what changed in life for you when he came.
Well, it wasn't that much of a big deal to me initially. I was told my brother's coming, and I remember being in my crib. Some of my recollections. I remember the spinning thing that I had on top. I don't know what the name of it was, but it was like a plane going around and different things. And then I remember that they gave him the crib and I moved, I guess, maybe I don't know if I was still in the crib, but I remember I got moved to a bed and he got the crib when he came home.
But he is also pivotal to some of your suffering in life.
He was very pivotal to a majority of my suffering as I grew up. Absolutely. Yes.
Because one day he followed you and he wanted some ice cream. Tell us about that pivotal moment for both you, him, your mom.
Yeah, it was, I was 9 or I just turned 10. My brother was 7 or 8, I guess 8. And my father had died maybe 3-4 months before that. And my brother was following me across this. We were going across the street to a Friendly's ice cream shop, and I was with my friend, so I really didn't want him to tag along. He really didn't used to hang out with me and my friends, but since my dad passed, he would try to hang out and he would come and do stuff, and he was always kind of an anchor with everything. He was slow. He didn't know how to play sports well. So he really was a distraction. He never was around, and I didn't like having him around. So as we were crossing the street, he was slowing in and he didn't make it across with us. So he yelled to me, "Can I come?" And it was 4-lane highway. Wasn't a highway. It was a road in the city of Yonkers, but it had 2 lanes going each way. And my brother yelled, "Can I come?" And I guess I looked around and I said, "Yeah." And as soon as he stepped in the road, he got hit by a car. And he went flying up in the air, probably 15, 20 feet, landed on his head. Traffic stopped. They ended up, an ambulance came and took him to the hospital, and he broke the bone. His, God, what bone is that? They said it was the hardest bone in your body, I guess, a hip, like in the hip area. And he ended up in the hospital for like 2 months in a full body cast, and the whole thing was a mess. And internally, I blamed myself for him getting hit.
And then, I was trying to figure out, because somewhere in there you said that he had a mental problem before this accident.
Yeah, things started to happen in the household. He would yell and scream and try to do things that to get attention. And it started to get, after my father passed, it really started to take off. He used it as a manipulation tool of my mother. He would break things in the house, tear the phone off the wall. He literally broke the door off the front entrance of our apartment. And we lived in a garden apartment building that was 2 floors, and there were 3 families on each. So it was small. Like you had to walk around. We were at the top of the stairs. So our door was knocked off by him. And after he did it 2 or 3 times, the super in our apartment building refused to fix it. He said, "I'm not fixing it anymore." So there was a period of, I think, 6 weeks where to get into our apartment, the door was leaning over. You could basically see right into the apartment. But it was, I mean, I could just tell you one crazy story after another with my brother. And my mother became, after my dad passed away, my mom, I didn't know this till later how he died, but I was told he died of a heart attack. And so my mother checked out. We were broke. My father owed all kinds of money for his business. I kind of took over everything and was dealing with bill collectors. My mother had to go on welfare, and she was ashamed, so she'd go on for a month or 2, and then she would go off again. And then I went to get paper routes and work on weekends to help to pay for our food and our clothing. And it was a mess. It was a mess.
And so, just listening to just getting that far with your life, it was like 2 months apart, your father's death and his accident.
Right.
And you also, I wouldn't say, would you say you feared him, or you just couldn't relax?
Well, I feared the situation of the craziness, because he would yell and scream. He would break things. My mother would yell at me because he said, "Tell Alan to shut up," or whatever crazy stuff. He broke my TV. He would break plates. He would bust the window. The police were at our apartment twice a week because the neighbors, the walls were paper thin, and he'd be screaming. And he knew if he screamed, my mother would say, "Neil, quiet, quiet. The neighbors are going to hear us." And she was so embarrassed and ashamed. And that she would do anything to get my brother to stop, which included giving him every penny that was in her pocketbook at the time, and for him to quiet down.
But he has threatened you.
He threatened me. I didn't find out till later on because I blocked it out. And in one of my last rehab, I went through some hypnosis, And what they explained to me when they brought me back was that I woke up in my apartment with my brother having a knife under my neck, and I was bleeding and yelling. And they said it happened at least 2 times that I brought up while I was in hypnotized.
And see, the thing that I want to get to make people understand how you was just a child. And we haven't even dealt with you coming out of the house yet. We haven't even dealt with that.
You know what? In the introduction, you said something that really jumped out at me. That was, it's almost crazy. I did not realize that I had a bad childhood until I started therapy when I was in my middle 20s. When I went away to college and people would say, oh, you grew up in Yonkers, what was your life like? I would tell everybody I had this great childhood. I grew up, there were a lot of kids in our neighborhood. I would go out and play sports. I loved baseball. I loved to go watch horses race, harness racing. And, everything, I had this really good childhood. And when I sat and first started talking to my therapist and I said I had this great childhood, by the time I was with her for a couple of months, she's like, do you remember what you told me when you first got in here? And I couldn't even fathom that it wasn't a good childhood. I had no idea. I was in such denial.
You was in a blackout. You was blocked out. Your protective mechanisms had kicked in. And see, that's the thing I want people to understand. I'm quite sure a lot of us do is, I believe you was an undiagnosed PTSD candidate.
That's exactly. When I went to the rehab and they did this, hypnotized me and these stories came out, one of my parting diagnoses was PTSD.
You had to have it.
Yes.
I mean, everything that you experience, especially trauma back to back. And I tell you what, when you lost your father, you actually lost your mother.
Absolutely. My mother.
So, you was just a baby. Your life hadn't even started yet. But yet you was able to play baseball and the horses and, laugh and be productive. And people with PTSD tend to be able to do that.
Oh. Okay, I didn't know that.
They tend to be able to be very productive, very successful because they have to be doing something. They have to accomplish something to keep their sanity. Oh. They can't just sit there and just let life consume them with pain.
That makes a lot of sense. I think.
And you were making it happen. You was doing so many things, and you were doing them very well. I mean, you became actually the head of the household.
Well, to give an example, I know we talked a little bit about the childhood and everything, but the week and a half after my father died, my mother was asking me to do all these things around the house, and she couldn't do anything. She would sit in the kitchen or in her room and smoke a cigarette, and I would see her staring out the window. I mean, she literally just checked out and was really demoralized and totally, she felt pain, and she was deserted and abandoned and left with these 2 little boys and with no money. So what ended up happening was we had a bill collector come to the house. Well, we had a lot of bill collectors coming, but this one in particular, the guy was coming, he knocked on the door, asked for my father. And I told him that my father died. Can I help you? He says, well, can I talk to your mother? And I said, no, you can talk to me. And I'm 9 years old. So the guy says, do you know where your father's car is? Your father is 4 months behind on his car payments. And he said, I'm here to repossess the car. And I said, well, we don't have any money, so I don't know what we're going to do about that. I said, but I did say, if I gave you the keys to the car, will this make things go away? And he says, yeah, absolutely. We'd like to get the car back. So I told him to please come back the next day. I just have to make sure it's okay with my mother. And so he left, and I went into my mother's room, and I told her what I just told you. and she handed me the keys to the car, and she said, just do whatever you think is the right thing to do. And that was it. And from that point on, I ran the house. I signed report cards. I wrote absent notes. Whatever needed to be done, I went out and got jobs to make money to pay for the food and the clothing and everything.
And you know, people, I know I have listened to people talk with you, and one of the themes seemed to be they couldn't understand why you felt so alone because there were people who were in your corner. But the life you were living, you couldn't help but feel alone because you couldn't even comprehend somebody even understanding.
You know, it was a lot. No, I appreciate you saying that. There was a lot to deal with, and there were some people, but the lessons that I learned, there was some depression, there was a lot of anxiety. I learned the messages that I heard were, be quiet, don't talk to people, because if they see who you are, they're not going to like you. So I got this knot in my stomach right after my father died. And I would walk to school, and I would talk to myself. And I would say to myself, I'm alone in this world. I don't know how I'm going to get through or what I'm going to do. Not knowing much about religion and spirituality, I was trying to see, is my father with God, or is my father buried in the box in the ground? And if he is with God, well, then I have a connection. So I'm going to talk or pray to God, pray to for my father to help me and guide me. And finally, what I ended up coming up with is kind of my mantra was that I could do anything, that if I can, whatever situation I am in, I will always land on my feet and be able to get myself out of this situation.
Well, tell us how you came to a place where you didn't feel that way anymore.
Well, that's exactly why I shared the knot in my stomach at 9. Now, growing up, playing baseball, I was basically a really good boy, and I loved baseball. It was kind of an escape for me to get out of the house, as well as going to our local racetrack at Yonkers Raceway, which was another escape for me. But I had this dream that I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. I wanted to play professionally. So I was taking care of my body. I was watching what I ate. People like at 15, 16 in high school, you would start to see the kids that are smoking pot, and their eyes would be red, and we'd be like, oh, look at that druggie. Oh, and they wouldn't come around and play with us anymore. So I despised people that did drugs. And if you took a vote either in high school or college, I would have been the one that would have been the person least likely to ever try drugs, because guys on the team would say, hey, take a hit of the pot, or I don't do that stuff. That's not me. I started drinking in college and drinking socially and having fun, but I would never, ever think of doing drugs. So fast forward, I had a baseball career that was short-lived. I played professionally in the Dominican Republic. I never had a love relationship or a girlfriend through high school and college. I was really nervous, couldn't talk to girls in high school. Then I found alcohol and I was able to talk to girls, but there was never a relationship. It was to fool around, to have sex, whatever. And all I cared about was playing professional baseball. So now, once I reached my goal, I had some arm problems. I played professionally in the Dominican Republic. And so I thought about it. I had a chance to go play professionally in Mexico, but I decided for the amount of money you get paid playing in minor league baseball, I have my college degree. It's time to move on. I lived a dream. I played professional baseball. So let's go. So as soon as I left baseball, I got a job, a sales job, but I also met a girl and I fell in love. And we quickly progressed. After I think it was 9 months, we ended up getting engaged, and it looked like I was going to get married. And then all of a sudden we started to realize, and I realized, we weren't right for each other. And this was my first relationship, first time I was in love, so it was all learning experiences. So we decided, we mutually broke up. And at this point, now I was mourning the loss of baseball for the first time in my life. I have a broken heart, and I'm in a bad place because I was in love with this girl and I lost my first love. So a friend of mine who would periodically ask me to do coke, I would say, no, I don't do stuff like that. But this one time after that, I was in a very vulnerable spot. And like I shared with you, from age 9 all the way, I always had that knot in my stomach every single day. And so he lays a line out of coke. And I'm like, okay, what the hell? I'll just try it. And so I did what I saw on TV. He gave me the straw, and I snorted it, and I kind of tilted my head back. And when I put my head back and I started coming back forward, I felt this euphoria. And I am like, oh my God, that knot that's been in my stomach every day since I'm 9 years old is gone. And oh my God, where has this stuff been my whole life? And I believe, I've read a lot about this, that I was actually addicted from that very first line. That was it.
A lot left when that came in.
Yeah.
A lot left.
Mm-hmm. That anxiety disappeared. It was the first time in my life that I felt like a whole person.
Wow.
And that was the beginning of a 24-year addiction to cocaine.
You also said that even though you had that experience, but the thrill came in the pursuit.
You know, I've heard that. I've learned a lot. I don't have any type of degree or anything in addiction and recovery, but I have a lot of personal experience of doing it, as well as learning technically what's involved, because I have been to 4 inpatient places and I've been to 15 outpatient programs. So I've learned quite a bit about addiction and what goes into it. And as you just shared, one of the driving forces was the whole thought of going to get cocaine and calling the dealer and being excited to do it. And it was almost became a ritual. I was addicted to the ritual of going to get it as much as I was addicted to using it.
Wow. And then you said you finally realized you was in trouble when your remote was moving around.
Yeah, that was pretty tough. There were a lot of days that I would be up 2-3 days just doing coke and drinking tequila straight through. And this one particular time you're talking about, I'd been up for a few days, and the clicker for my TV, I would go to the bathroom. It would be on the living room table. And I would go to the bathroom, and somehow, every time I came back, that clicker was in my bedroom. And I'm like, how is this possible? And I believed there were ghosts in the house. And then I started chasing after them, and it was a pretty crazy scene.
So when you say you were seeing ghosts, was it actual image of people, or was it like on TV with the white sheets, or what did it look like?
What ended up happening is this is back in 2007. So I had one of those earlier smartphones. So it had a video camera in it. And I don't know why I was videotaping, but I was looking through the camera, and as I'm panning around my room, I see these shadows. And as I look closer, and I'd been up for a couple of days, I started to see faces in the shadows, and it looked like these little images, like these little ghosts, but they had there was facial recognition, and some had hair, so there was some female with the long hair, and when I would take the camera phone away, I couldn't see them. And as soon as I put the camera back, I'm like, oh my God. So I'm taping them, and I'm playing music, and I'm trying to talk to them. And I'm seeing them run around the room and everything. And I'm like, come on, stop. I'm friendly. And I'm singing and running around and chasing them. And that went on for about a half hour. And I was renting the basement apartment of a good friend's house. And his wife heard me singing and running around. So she knocked and I went to the door, even though I was all messed up. And I said, you got to see this. And I showed her the video of the ghosts. And I say, do you see them? And she looked at me like I had 3 heads. And she goes, Alan, I think you really need to go get some sleep. And I was like, hell with her. She doesn't believe in it. She doesn't see it. They're right here. And I ran back in and I started playing with them again. And then eventually what ended up happening was it felt to me like they were now laughing at me and mocking me. So now I started chasing after them and I blacked out. And from that, the rest of the stuff I was told is I totally destroyed their basement apartment. She was afraid because she was a friend. She didn't want to call the police, but she heard the crashing and the banging and the screaming, and she finally had to call the police. And what I was told was that there wasn't a stitch of furniture left standing. I knocked everything down and destroyed everything, from tables to my bed to the refrigerator to chairs to dressers. Everything was flattened. I must have been doing it for about 45 minutes. And I was told that it took 12 policemen that came in, tied me naked to a board, and carried me out and took me to the hospital.
Would you say that's when fear finally entered into your drug addiction? Because first you didn't have any fear.
You know, there was some fear, but unfortunately, as crazy as that story is, that wasn't my bottom. And it's pretty amazing that I am so fortunate that I'm alive. I've had people that I've worked with in the program and friends that I guess one of the reasons I wrote this book is to help others, that no matter how far they have fallen, the message was always, as I started to get better and I put one year after another, if Alan could get sober, anybody can get sober, because I shouldn't be here. I just happen to get lucky, and God has given me so many chances, because I could sit here for hours telling you stories of almost dying, and I actually have a story that I did die in a car accident that I was brought back to life. So, you know, after knowing and going through all these things, you know, I believe I'm here for 2 reasons. I have these 2 beautiful daughters. I got married later on and had the children later on. So my daughters are 19 months apart. One's 15 and the other one's 13. So I believe I'm here to take care of them. And then the other is to give back and to help people that either are about to start taking drugs and alcohol or that are already involved with addiction, to help them, to show, to talk, to share my experience, that they don't have to go through 24 years of addiction and the pain and the suffering that I went through, that there is a way out and that anybody can get better if they're willing to take the help.
Wow, and the thing about it is, like your book says, walking out the other side. What do you basically mean by that?
You know, that came to me. I had been thinking about writing a book for a while. And after I was sober 5 years when I finally decided to do this. And I guess my whole thing in my life is it's been a journey. I think everybody's life is a journey. We all have journeys. And I was in a really bad place for a long time. So, you know, the wording is kind of obvious, walking out the other side. So I went from this life of addiction and not knowing where I was going to go, and where eventually I was going to die. It was just a matter of time, where I was finally able to walk out the other side. And then the subtitle of the book is An Addict's Journey from Loneliness to Life. And I got my life back because of recovery and everything else that I went through to get better.
So what do you think was the catalyst that really got you over to that other side?
Everybody, depending on, there's a lot of different thoughts about addiction and it being a disease and everything else. What I believe and what I've seen is everybody, you have to hit a bottom, but everybody's bottom is different. I know some people that they may be an executive, they got pulled over for DWI, they got their hand slapped, they had to go to driver court, they lost their license for 6 months, and that was the wake-up call they needed, and they didn't lose everything. Unfortunately for me, my bottom kept getting lower and lower and lower, where it ended up where I lost my wife, I lost my kids, I lost my job. Eventually, I was kicked out of that apartment because I destroyed it. So I literally went from having everything to being homeless. And I was broken inside. From the outside, it looked like I had everything. It looked like I was living the all-American dream. Before my wife and I separated, we had a house. I had a house out in Long Island. I had 2 daughters. I had the little car, the train car that drove me from my house to the train station from Long Island into New York City. I had the big 6-figure job. My wife had this Dodge minivan that had the 2 TV screens in it, multi-area air conditioning and heat, and it was like everything you could ask for. We had the white picket fence. I had 2 Labradors. Anybody looking in was like, oh my God, this guy has everything. But I was so broken inside. And because of this disease and my addiction, I lost every single thing. So it progressively got worse. I had that incident at my friend's house that I destroyed it. My wife filed for divorce and got a restraining order against me. I tested positive at work, so I lost my job. We were going through all this money. And it was getting worse, and I was still using. I couldn't stop. Then as we were going through the divorce, I ended up back in court. We had to go for some proceeding, and the judge ended up ordering that I get drug tested. And so before we went in to see the judge's particular time, I took a drug test because they said I had to, and we went in front of the judge, and the first thing he said is, Mr. Charles, you have tested positive for cocaine. I am ruling that you will not be able to see or talk to your children for 6 months until you can complete weekly clean drug tests for a total of 6 months. And at that point, I broke down because I know there was no way that I was going to be able to stay clean and take a weekly drug test for 6 months. So at that point, it was like, I've lost my children. And I broke down. And it still took me another 4 months after that until I was finally able to find the last time that I've ever used. And that date was December 7th, 2007. So my sobriety date is December 8th, 2007. So this December 8th, I will have 10 years clean.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So what was it about the program, just a basic, that really was pivotal in turning you into a hopeful state?
Well, I saw it working for a lot of people. And to be quite honest, it got to a point that was the only thing where I was welcomed. I lost family, I lost friends, I lost relationships, I lost 2 wives, I lost my children, I lost all my money, everything to my addiction of cocaine. So part of the recovery program, whether it's AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, or CA, Cocaine Anonymous, they all follow the same path. And part of it is you are welcome to come if you have a desire to stop using alcohol or cocaine or whatever you're there for. So I kept having a desire, but I also unfortunately kept having a desire to keep using. And I would go back and I would say, hi, my name is Alan. I'm an addict and an alcoholic, and I have 2 days clean. And then I would go back 3, 4, 5 days. Then I would disappear. So I'd come back in 2 weeks later after I relapse. Hi, my name is Alan. I'm an addict and alcoholic. I have 1 day clean. Then I would have 30 days clean, and I would come back again with 1 or 2 days. And it was embarrassment, shameful, but I was welcome back every single time. That was the only place I was able to go.
And a lot of times people would feel that your daughters would have been enough for you to just snap out of it. People just assume that would happen.
You would think that, right?
But how would you explain to them that it's impossible?
Well, see, not that there's anything wrong not that there's any wrong way to get clean. So if you get clean because we're sober, because you're embarrassed and ashamed and you want your mother to be proud of you, or you don't want to lose your marriage or your relationship, or you don't want to lose your job, or you don't want to lose your children, that's great. There's no wrong reason to get sober. But from my experience and everything I've seen, this disease is so powerful that unless you're really doing it for yourself and you have a desire and you're asking for help, you're not going to get better. And it doesn't matter. And that's why people have given up their children. That's why these athletes that are rich still, even though they're making millions of dollars, they are willing to lose their $1 million jobs because they want to go get high. I happened this afternoon, I got an opportunity to meet Darryl Strawberry, and I spent some time with him talking about addiction and recovery and going out and giving back, and that's what he's doing. He taped the Dr. Oz show. I don't know, Darryl Strawberry's a former Major League Baseball player that played with the Yankees and the Mets, and he won the World Series, and he was on the top of the world, but he had a huge cocaine addiction, and he was suspended 3 different times from Major League Baseball. And so he's an example of, it doesn't matter if you're going to lose everything, and he had everything. He talks about living behind a guarded wall area for housing development for rich people. He was making $3, $4, $5 million a year playing baseball for the New York Yankees, winning World Series, and he couldn't stop doing cocaine. He was willing to give it all away. And that's what addiction does. It's a non-discriminatory disease. It doesn't matter if you're young or old, doesn't matter if you're poor or rich, doesn't matter if you're black and white, doesn't matter your economic status, it affects everybody.
So if you had a chance to talk to parents, what would be the most important thing that you would want them to know to prevent this from happening to their child?
That's a great question, and there's a lot of good information. And I believe it's early education, that we're not doing enough about that. And it is, and from my own experience, it's being on top of your kids, knowing what their activities are, setting boundaries, making them responsible, having after-school activities, keeping busy. And it's not just from an addiction standpoint. I just believe there's, unfortunately, a lack of parenting these days. They talk about the millennials and things like that. I have friends that have children range in age from 5 years old, mine are 13 and 15, all the way up to kids that are going away to college. And some of the things that I've seen are just horrendous. They're entitled. They don't have sense of responsibility. And I can go on and on and on of different things. And all of that type of, when the child ends up in that type of situation, that's a fertile ground for somebody that's going to end up having an addiction problem.
Well, I also think too, because I had to raise up two boys. One of the things I emphasize to them is to know yourself. It's important that you know yourself. It's important that I knew them. And one of the things that I told them was that the world is going to try to tell you who you are, but you're going to always tell them who you are. And I think that's one of the missing links today. Kids don't know who they are. And if they go out in the world and people introduce something new to them, if they don't know who they are, they're not going to say no. They're not going to say that's not me. It's something should already be in place of their identity that lets them know that that is not me, but they don't know that's not them.
You know what? That's a wonderful piece, and I didn't talk about that, but you're absolutely right. I know some people friends that have had a lot of success raising children because that's exactly, they did some of the things I talked about rules and boundaries and discipline. And these kids knew what was expected of them and they knew who they were. It wasn't quite as eloquently expressed like you did, that they should know themselves, but in essence that's what they were doing was, you have these things that you think about yourself. You don't do drugs. You think you look at yourself in a different place. You don't lower yourself to do things just to impress somebody else. So and with that, it's being comfortable in your own skin.
It's like could nobody tell them who they were. It was like we made sure we knew each other because I told them, I don't know what it's like to be you. You don't know what it's like to be me. And I said that for each one of us. I said, so we always have to let each other know who we are in this house.
That's wonderful advice. You sound like an incredible mother.
And that was important because I knew for myself that life waits for you. And if that door ever opened, it can get into your mind.
Yes. No, that's wonderful. You said it wonderfully.
It's a sad thing to see because I've seen it happen where, the world sees your vulnerability.
No,
they know, their dad's not home, their mom's not home all the time. Oh, this dysfunctional child, let me get this person. They like predators.
Well, that's what it is. And that's what they say about the disease of addiction. It's like and unfortunately, that's why I believe so much in early education. One of the things now, I'm in the process of putting a program together that hopefully middle to late 2018, I'm going to launch. And I'm starting out because my sweet spot is that I was a college athlete. I was a high school student athlete. So I am putting together a program that centers on student athletes where the coaches, the athletic directors, they have to sit down every 4 to 6 weeks with all the players on the team. They fill out an assessment. And what we're looking to accomplish is to find these red flags of somebody that might have depression, suicidal thoughts, or anything that gives us a red flag that they're going to that they might be a subject of using drugs. And we are going to early intervene with therapy or whatever needs to be done in that point. And because part of the study, I'm working with Mount Sinai Hospital, and some of these things that we just finished studying and that they're going to provide me with is studying of brain imagery, and what alcohol, pot, cocaine, opioids, heroin, each one of them does something different to the brain, but it changes brain chemistry immediately. And what happens is those that continue to use, that's where the addiction builds up, where you can't say no anymore. And that's where you get the disease. And you never know when you're going to cross that line and be addicted. If I wish I was able to be a recreational user. And there are some people that can do that. But you never know. Is it going to be the first time you do the cocaine like me? Is it going to be you have a traumatic experience and you start drinking and now you become an alcoholic? Is it you drinking socially and in college you get carried away and you become an alcoholic in college? You don't know when you're going to hit that point. And what they say in addiction, it's kind of a ha-ha funny thing, is we all start out as cucumbers. But when you become a pickle, you can't come back to being a cucumber.
Well said.
So I mean, I will always be a drug addict. I will always be an alcoholic. But the difference is I'm an addict and an alcoholic in recovery. Every day I have a daily reprieve because I practice a program of recovery.
And so, after I had read your book and just listened to what you said, it confirms it. People don't plan on becoming an addict. This is the scary part. That's why I like what you're doing, the prevention part, to create awareness. Like I remember when my kids was in elementary school, that's when they had that DARE program. And they had them to say no to drugs and what they do if somebody told them to do drugs. Well, my son, I think he was like about 5 years old. He said he would say no, and he would run home and hug his mom. He would run home.
Well, that would work at 5 years old, but
exactly,
unfortunately,
he knew that's not what he wanted to do. He gonna run home and get away from him. See, and see, that's the important thing is people don't understand. You don't plan on being an addict. They don't realize that you don't have a choice after a certain point once the chemistry shifts.
Exactly.
And that's the scary part. That's the part that just almost like a dark cave in, and you don't have any say. So that's when it becomes frightening to me. It would be is when you don't have a choice.
Well, I can share with you. I remember the first time I realized that I no longer had a choice. I was during my first marriage. I was up in Connecticut. My wife had gone to work, and I swore, I got to stop. I'm not going to do this. And I remember I started crying, and I was talking to myself saying, do I hate myself that much that I'm going to keep putting this crap in my body? And I was crying and crying. And about 15 minutes after that, I picked the phone up. I called my dealer. And as soon as I placed that call, the sadness of crying, of hating myself, and why am I doing this? I went right down to go get more cocaine. And I was happy as all could be. And I realized I no longer had a choice. You lose the ability to say, just say no. That's, unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. It might work like that in the beginning, but if once you've tried it or you get to that point where you now have the disease, you lose all choices to make.
And the whole time you was talking, the bottom line is you're rewired.
It changes your brain chemistry.
You are rewired. You are not what you were born. That's the scary part. That's the part that people don't get in touch with. And you almost stumble into it because you just sampling or thinking you just checking it out. But that checkout can be a check-in to a life-changing experience. I mean, when your chemistry changed, that causes it to think that it's giving you what you want because you selected this. It don't feel like it's doing you any harm. It's just honoring what you chose to do. It's not being negative or positive. It's good or bad. It's not the devil or the angel. You know what I mean? It's giving you what you gave it.
Absolutely. You're giving it power over you. And then what ends up happening is having that power, you will do anything that you have to do. And that's why I said it doesn't matter. People have sold their children. They've gone and they've left marriages. They've stolen money from their bosses and their family members. They've stolen rings. They've slept with people. It doesn't matter. There's always another yet. You will do anything to get that drug at that point.
And you don't mind being alone. You don't mind being alone with your baby.
Well, you want to be alone because you don't want to share any of the cocaine with anybody else either.
Wow. This has been awesome. Give people an idea how they can get in touch with you, what you have to offer, and how they can get your book.
Okay, that's wonderful. I appreciate it. My website is walkingouttheotherside.com. And at my website, one of the things, my major thing that I am doing now, it tells about my speaking engagements. If you have an organization, a school, a business, and think I would be the right message to share with your organization, you can contact me there, and I'm willing to travel. I've been traveling all over the country, so you can find that there. In addition, my book is there, so there's links. My book is being sold at all online retailers. So whether it's Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, if you Google Walking Out the Other Side, fortunately, pages and pages will pop up where you will be able to get the book. But there's direct links at my website, and it's in hardcover, softcover, an ebook, and an Audible book. So I think I covered all the gamuts.
And it's actually a memoir, so it's real.
It's there. I had to take stuff out of there that my publisher and I felt people wouldn't believe, because it's a wild story. It really is. And everything is 100% true in the book.
Excellent. Alan, you are on the Truth Will Set You Free show. Give us a truth to remember you by.
Anybody can survive no matter what. And my motto is never, ever, ever give up.
Beautiful. And I have to tell you, his website is awesome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And if you get a chance to get his book, get that book.
Well, it's been my pleasure to be on the show with you, Linda.
Oh, it was a joy. And more than anything, the fact that you have some prevention going here, that people can become conscious of, one time could be death time.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being on our show. Hey, when that program you're talking about launches, you get in touch with me. I want you to come back.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. And if you do another book, which I feel like you are, because it's going to be a self-help book.
Well, I'll be back.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye now.